Now, the UI in Modeler 2021 is a little bit different than the UI in Modeler 2020. Before, we would hit the spacebar to actually see all of our tools and what hotkeys we use to do that. Now there's this tab up here at the top, and we have basically all of the hotkeys that control any viewing states here, the state, a lot of select tools, deform. If you just want to see all of them, you still have the same hotkey editor that you used to have. Let's take a look at some of the basic operations you can do in here. So for one, Modeler comes with a bunch of different radial menus. So you have like the add, boolean, deform. I mean, I'll go into all of these. And you can see them all here in the drop-down menu. And if I am not in Modeler, so if I turn Modeler off and I hit C, then you will get these options. So you can use these when Modeler is not on with just your standard Radial menu hotkey. But one thing is that when you turn Modeler on, C is no longer the drop down for this. And in fact, you don't even want to use that drop down because Modeler has hotkeys for each menu. So if you want to see what hotkeys these are, I mean, you just hit the drop down and then you should see the hotkeys listed next to the name of the radial menu. And then just to start off, I think I'm going to use the add menu. So if I type Alt A, then I'll get my radial menu pop up and I'll just let go of it to select any of these things. So that's cube, undo. One thing that I will note is GeForce Experience. Some of these hotkeys are actually the same for GeForce Experience, and you can't really use them until you turn off the hotkeys from GeForce Experience. So one example is if I do Alt Z, I will get this really annoying pop-up for GeForce Experience. So let's fix that right now. Hit the little icon and you have these keyboard shortcuts in here. Now I would either change these or delete these. I don't ever use GeForce Experience, so I'm just gonna delete all of these so I don't get this super annoying issue anymore. Okay, back, done. And now Alt Z will not open all that crap. Okay, so let's use the add radial menu finally. I'll just do Alt A, I'll drop a box, and then you'll see that it creates a geometry node called Q primitive, and it's got this box in it. So let's say that I want to drop a tube or something, but I want to drop it actually on the box. I don't want to drop it just at the center point. So if I go Alt A, and I'd go QTube. By default, it is going to drop it at the center of the view. However, if I hit this key, then it's going to bring up this little handle tool. And you can see it's giving us little points with a direction when we hover over any of the geometry. Even when we hover over the geometry itself, we can actually put this on top of where it already is. But when we click, you'll see that it orients and snaps that position. Now, if I want to change this, I can just hit this button again to bring up the tool. Click. Click, click. And now what it's doing is it's placing it based on the pivot of this object. And the pivot position is very important for how it gets placed. It's placing this tube in the center of our selection. That's because the pivot of this tube is at the center. So to change the pivot of something, the hotkey for that is N. And we'll hold this and you'll see another handle kind of come up. And that's going to be our handle to change the pivot. So if I change the pivot to there, then I go back and I hit this key again, you'll see that I can place this based off pivot position. If I pivot this and I rotate the pivot, holding control to snap the rotation, then I can hit this again. And now you can see that it's coming up in the right orientation. All right, so now hop back up at the OBJ level. We have our tube and we have our box. So let's take a look at the Kitbash features, which is another way of adding geometry into a scene. So if you have the Modeler tab open, you'll see this Kitbash option. And if you click on it, you will get this pop-up. You'll have all these messages in by default. I have not added anything yet, but we can add things, and I'll show you also how this works. So this is just referencing, if you can remember, when we unzipped this and we copy and pasted this Modeler folder into our Houdini 18.5 folder, inside of it is this Kitbash folder. And inside of that are these two insert mesh and quad primitives folder. And all it's doing is it's saving this geometry to the folder and then also saving a little snapshot image of it. So if I was to create a new folder, you can actually add folders to this. Like for example, if I just go in here and I create a new folder and I call this tutorial test, you'll see that we now have this tutorial test folder in here. And there's nothing in here by default, but we can go ahead and use the Kitbash Radial menu. And so let's say I want to make test geometry Tommy into a Kitbash item. If I go Alt K to get the Kitbash open, I'll just go new item. Oh, I think I have to hop into here. Let's go new item. And then you'll see it automatically snap into place, and then take a little screenshot and it will save this to the Kitbash folder. So now I have always in my tutorial test, I have this test geometry Tommy, and it's saved as a BGO and it saves the little thumbnail. So, I mean, it's awesome. And then anytime in any other Houdini session, I can use this. So it can be really cool if you have a bunch of models that you've modeled, or you have a pack or something, to save a bunch of these into the Kitbash and then be able to bring them in anytime and be able to see what they are and kind of place them all just with this Kitbash. So now bringing these in works pretty similar to how the add menu works. So if I wanted to bring in a test geometry Tommy, I'll delete this guy, and I wanted to bring him in on this box, all I would do is I would double click and then I would hit this guy and select somewhere on the box. I want to put him on top of the box and then maybe rotate him a little bit. I can make another one if I want, just double click. I'll put Tommy's on every side of this box. And there you go. So you have that option of just bringing in a full mesh by double clicking. But if you right click, you can actually see that it gives us these options. So you have add to scene, double click, which is what we were doing, insert mesh, and replace mesh. So let's say I'm not going to use Tommy for this because I don't want to boolean him into a box. So let's say that I wanted to bring in this kind of sync look, but I wanted to blend it into this box. So for that, we have to jump into the actual box. The insert mesh is going to boolean this with whatever surface we select. So let's say I wanted to insert this mesh into this cube. If I double click to get into the cube and then just select one of the surfaces, I can alt double click on any of my meshes from the Kitbash, and it will boolean it into the mesh. And by default, the scale is a little bit too big here. If I click this surface and double click, and you can add, and very easily bring things in, slide things around. And now some of the controls on here, the connection type is basically just gonna remove the edges, and this is definitely gonna cause some n-gons. So if you're trying to avoid that, probably avoid this. But you can choose how you want to bring it in. You can rotate. So you have a bunch of options here on the node. Not everything is a hotkey, so just do also keep an eye on these parameters over here. Let's say I wanted to do that same thing, but instead of just dropping one at a time, I wanted to do a bunch of them. So if I hit 3 to hop in this view, so let's say I want all of the edges here to be screws. If I alt double click, you'll see by default it brings it in using the size of all of them. But if I check on this per polygon option over here, you'll see that we now have a new screw for each separate polygon. And then here's where the random orientation stuff like that can come into play. So that's a good chunk on the Kitbash and adding geometry. In the next one, I'm gonna go about some of the actual kind of modeling tools in here.